Hi, everybody. That was very nice, wasn't it? I do like the woos, whoever wooed out there. That was nice.
Like, be real, you're all here for Ben.
No, that's not true. That is not true
It's
at
okay. It's okay. I would be too.
Well, thanks for having us. This is going to be a lot of fun. We'll have Molly here for the next 40 to 45 minutes. And yeah, as the introduction goes, I mean, talk about a transition, huh? Broadcaster, journalist, and then she goes into venture capitalism. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, we can get into that later on, but she's well versed in how the whole world works and how it all kind of syncs up together. And now she's specifically in sort of the clean tech industry. So we'll get into all of that. I don't think that we're going to have time for maybe some personal questions, but maybe if I get the green light, maybe we can take some audience questions as well, because I'm sure she has a lot to share. So before we kick anything off, Molly, would you like to say anything to these lovely people?
No, I'm delighted to be here. I grew up in Montana and North Dakota, and so the Twin Cities are where I would come for fun. And of course, the Marketplace parent company is American Public Media, so I've spent a lot of time here, and it's really nice to be here and great to be connected to this network.
Yeah. So I guess, Molly, we'll just start this thing off with sort of a big picture, top-down look at everything in your industry and what you can tell us about. When it comes to clean technology, we're talking about renewables, energy, both production, capture, waste, recycling, all of that. Pretty broad spectrum when it comes, but a lot of technology in that world, and I think a very important technology for our society at this point. So as of right now, how do you see that both domestically and globally and internationally?
Yeah, just for a little background on how a tech reporter ended up doing this at all was that, I was at Marketplace Tech and trying to figure out a way into this story about the climate crisis. And it took me probably longer than it should, around 2017 or 2018, to realize, oh, actually, this is the biggest tech and business story in the world. Because fundamentally, when humans are threatened, we innovate our way out of those problems. And we have done that with everything from fire to electricity to penicillin. And I have no doubt that we will continue to do the same thing. All of the most dire predictions that you hear about anything usually rely on us not doing anything. And we're not a lay down and die kind of species. So I got very excited about the funding opportunities, about the technologies that do, like you said, they encompass everything from renewables to fusion energy, but so much in between. The software layers that keep supply chains more efficient, the agricultural innovations that mean that we will be able to grow food in increasingly hostile climate conditions. And so I'm super excited about the size of the opportunity. We've seen a huge amount of public, I don't want to give all the answers right now, but we've seen a bunch of public money come in lately that is catalyzing private dollars at a 4-to-1 rate. You saw fires in California that probably catalyzed $50 billion worth of venture investments from people in Silicon Valley who were like, oh, this is the thing. We should probably do something about it. And so it's just there's a huge amount of money flowing in this direction. I think it's where global markets are going, and it's a pretty exciting time.
So where does the United States fall in all that? Because it was at one point in time, if I understand this correctly, and I'm going to put this disclaimer out there, guys, I don't know crap, okay? I'm going to do my best that I can to crash course myself getting ready for this thing to make it seem like I know something about technology and about investments, all right? I'm a football guy. And I try to make people laugh at 3 o'clock to 4:30 every day. So the way I do understand those, the United States has been the global leader when it comes to this sort of investment in this technology, but it has sort of maybe slipped a little bit, and other markets, Australia, other markets around the world have kind of picked up, and it's good for them. But where domestically, where are we at? Are we still very much leading the charge, or is the rest of the world sort of catching up?
Actually, I would say I think China is probably the biggest investor right now in clean tech and renewable energy deployment, which it may be somewhat surprising to hear. But we have, again, just in the last few years, right? Everybody talks about the Inflation Reduction Act being a climate bill and catalyzing a lot of money for clean tech investment. Actually, all three of these big legislative accomplishments, the infrastructure bill and the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, all contain something like $1 trillion worth of investment in R&D, in actual deployment, in literally putting solar panels on churches. And if you do it all with local money, it's like you can stack these, or with local talent, you can stack these credits. I had crypto entrepreneurs coming to me last year being like, I think I might get into solar. Like, there's a lot of money in the IRA. And so generally what happens is when you see public investment, it catalyzes private dollars, like I said, at a 4-to-1 rate. So if you are looking at like a $13 trillion opportunity, nobody wants to be left behind. And so it's a huge deal. And then, of course, the other thing that the United States does, yes, we are among the top emitters in the world when it comes to carbon emissions, but we innovate. And so I think the thesis around venture capital and private investment is that it's incumbent on rich nations and rich people to fund and adopt climate solutions that are going to start out too expensive, like the Tesla Roadster or the iPhone, and then get cheaper over time. Like, we have to invent stuff that is going to feel like it's too expensive for the market, so that in 3, 4, 5, 10 years, every market on Earth can afford it. It'll become commoditized.
So is solar, we'll stick with the energy generation, is the solar component the biggest part of the industry that is, I think, going in that direction as far as starting out expensive, getting cheaper? I mean, now people can put those on pretty much anything on their houses. Is that the best example of that? Or where's wind at? Where I know hydro's part of it as well. How does it fit in?
Yeah, I mean, solar is an interesting example because maybe people are familiar with something called the clean tech 1.0 boom, which is that around the mid-2000s, there was a ton of money that went into clean tech, primarily oriented around solar. And what nobody saw coming was two things. One, that government subsidies might run out. So, we can talk later about finding companies that can use government money to bridge the valley of death as they commercialize, but not be solely reliant on them as their only business plan. Nobody also, I think, realized that China would come in and just make super cheap panels. And so it became a commodity, which is good for deployment, but not as good for investors. Now, you can quibble, like $1 billion went into clean tech during those years and $3 billion came out. So it still is a pretty good return. It just took longer. But it is an excellent example of technologies that start expensive and get cheap. But my show is called Everybody in the Pool because there's a solution everywhere. There are tons of companies that you're not thinking are climate companies, but they are. If they're in food, if they're in supply chain, if they're in agriculture, if they're in landscaping, they're climate companies. And so I think it's an exciting time now because we've started to open the lens of what we think of as a climate company, because everything has something.
Well, in that regard, though, it is confusing to me as a consumer to know what's real and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you feel like there's a lot of false actors and fraudulent companies that, we'll probably get into AI as well, and maybe we can get into it now, but everybody says that aggregated computing is AI. It's not. I'm confused on even what AI is now if we claim everything's AI. If you claim that you're a X company and that you're, environmentally sustainable, I don't know that. How difficult is it for an investor to look at a company, whether emerging or maybe a standardized company that we can all think of, and they say, oh, well, this component of our company is sustainable and we're about the environment. Like, how do we know? How do we believe them? What can we test? Can we put them through?
Now I just want to geek out on AI. You've opened Pandora's box here. Like, well, actually, okay, we'll come back to AI. I think that you want to, when you're evaluating these opportunities, one, there is a lot of greenwashing going on, and there's no question it can be hard to tell the difference. But two, I almost consider that a little bit of a cost of doing business, and I don't want to kick anybody out of bed for eating crackers. If you come to me and you say you're working with science-based targets, right? There are actually metrics that people are applying. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, the sort of science-based targets that have been set by the UN. If you're talking with a company and they're saying, like, we're calculating avoided carbon emissions based on these science-based targets, then that's great. That is a green flag for you as an investor when you're evaluating that company. But if they're like, we're a landscaping company and we encourage people to look at drought-resistant and drought-tolerant landscaping, that's like good enough for me. because everything helps. Everything is necessary, and every part of our economy can be transformed in this way. And so I just want to, frankly, I just want to know they're thinking about it. If they are coming to you and saying, we're a sustainability company, we're a carbon removal company, then there are in fact metrics they should be using. And if they can't answer those questions, just keep walking.
Yeah. I guess because I mentioned a very excitable trigger word for you, and AI.
It's just because I'm a nerd.
Well, I think that it is important to talk about. So how does AI play a part in this world of clean tech, in this world of investing and all of that? Because like I said, I think it's actually quite confusing. Again, it seems like it's a marketing buzzword to make it seem like your company is more on the up and up, that we're like, oh, we're so technology advanced that we use AI. I'm like, well, what sort of system are you using? Well, it's basically just, an aggregated search engine. But AI, to me, the way I understand it, is creating something that sort of is almost self-sustaining and thinks on its own. So like, am I to, completely off on like what AI is? Because it just seems like it's everywhere now. And like, not everybody has AI just like in a snap of a finger. Some of it has to be fake.
So AI, so the other thing I do in my copious spare time is I host a podcast for Microsoft about AI and the future of work, which is why I'm kind of obsessed with this topic. So AI, artificial intelligence, the thing we think of as the glorified search engine, like some version of artificial intelligence in the form of data analysis has existed for decades. The AI you're talking about, where it's self-sustaining and can think for itself, is theoretical so far and does not yet exist. And some crazy people in AI are still trying to create it, even though we have a lot of sci-fi telling us to please not do that. In between that lies this next generation of AI that has gotten all the buzz right now, the generative artificial intelligence, or large language models. And that's ChatGPT. ChatGPT is the interface that they have put on these large language models so that you can interact with them and get information back that is, at this point, much like a way more efficient search engine and analysis engine. What it has gotten good at that it didn't used to be able to do as effectively before is high-level pattern recognition. So like you and I could say, and so an example actually is, I know this woman who's a futurist, and she said, I took the publicly available financial data about a hospital that was underperforming, and I ran it through a large language model, and I said, can you find me business efficiencies without headcount reduction by looking at the past 10 years of publicly available financial data about this hospital? And it was like, oh yeah, here are 6 strategies that you could do. Now, as a human, you could do that with an MBA and 6 to 8 years of study at Harvard, and it might take you months and months and months, or you might pay McKinsey $1 million to do that for you. That is, in fact, a game changer. And so that is those are the capabilities that we have now that require the right implementation by corporations. They require the right data sets. And then when it comes to climate, everybody is sort of like, oh, okay, cool. Now AI is here and it'll also solve climate. And there are sort of 2 sides to that coin, one of which is that it uses a lot of energy because data centers for cloud computing now account for something like 2 to 5% of global electricity use. It has been estimated that a single ChatGPT query, so if I ask it to interpret my tarot card reading, which I occasionally do, that's the equivalent of charging my iPhone 12 times, which I don't feel great about. Yeah. So you have this sort of double whammy. Also, though, it could potentially help us figure out how to distribute electricity much more efficiently, right? Or get renewable energy resources in places we haven't thought of yet. So there are always trade-offs.
Is there concern about how the data is sort of put into the AI system? Not that there's going to be a worldwide conspiracy on how they're going to manipulate data, but how do we know? We all know that most of the data that's being put in that they're chewing up and spitting out is still put in by us, which we make mistakes, we have biases, we come from different beliefs. Like, how does that affected when you do a search on something like that?
Yeah, I mean, the data is the only thing that matters. The only thing that matters. How do they get more of it, and is it good? And in the AI community and the computing community in general, they'll say, you know, garbage in, garbage out. If you have bad data that goes in, you're going to get bad information coming out of it. What I think we're likely to see, just because right now, when it comes to these really, really big large language models, ChatGPT, Claude from Anthropic, Bard from Google, those have all been trained on an absolutely absurd amount of our data that we didn't totally know we were handing over for that purpose. What you're going to see, but it also means that only companies with that amount of resource can create these models. So pretty much like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and nope, I'm done, right? They're going to own large language models going forward. What you're going to see, though, is companies train models on their own internal data. So they'll just say, I can't deal with all the garbage. And frankly, it's inefficient to have a chatbot have to sort through all of the information in the world when all I really want it to know is, you know, what are the 6 best regenerative farming practices in Minnesota? So you'll just see smaller models be developed that use less energy and use less data, and that can optimize for better data.
See, you just use a trigger word for me.
Oh,
I'm a huge fan of regenerative farming, and I think that we should be doing
that's
more.
where my converse are from. Sky Farms, which is a regenerative farm that was an investment by Emerson Collective. That's what a nerd I am. I'm wearing the shoes.
See, I was going to comment on your shoes earlier because they're super clean.
They're pretty new.
Yeah, they're pretty new. Let's kind of 2 parts. How would somebody use? I'll put you on the spot a little bit. How would somebody use as an investor? You know, I know Minnesota is actually doing a really good job of regenerative farming. It could get better. North Dakota, I think, is, you know, one of the gurus is actually from up there, and it's kind of trickled down into the Dakotas and Minnesota, and hopefully beyond. But let's just say I'm an investor that understands the value of replenishing our soil, that's going to get away from sort of big farm, not do all the pesticides and fertilizers, and I'm going to truly turn this into a regen farm. And I'm also an investor in that world. Like, how would you use AI? Like, what type of search would somebody use for, like, hey, I'm really interested in this emerging technology. I don't know if it's the software that I want to invest in. I don't know if it's the hardware where they use punches to actually plant the seeds, and they actually use fire and propane, and they burn some of the weeds as opposed to chemical herbicides and stuff like that. Like, how would we use AI to do a search like that of, like, hey, is this a good investment or not?
So as a diligence opportunity?
Yeah.
I mean, you would use it in a similar fashion to using Google, just much faster and much more precise. So I could imagine in that scenario, I pull up ChatGPT. Now I know that it can make stuff up. And so any facts and figures it gets me, I'm going to double check, but
Right.
It's at least a place to start. So I would say, here's one. And one of the fascinating things is that you can assign these chatbots a persona. So you could say, you're a venture capital investor who specializes in agriculture technology, and I want to brainstorm an opportunity with you. You know, I've just talked to this company. I'll give you an example of a founder I interviewed yesterday at a company called Trace Genomics that does, genetic soil analysis. And I would say, okay, I talked to this company. They're doing gene level soil analysis, and then they have built some algorithms to analyze the soil and say, give you sort of a personalized medicine approach to planting and pesticide use. And they've created a baseline of data so they can actually compare it to farms in your region that have similar issues or needs. Do you know, so then I say, ChatGPT, do you know of companies like this? And what are 5 questions that you think I should ask?
So you can be that sort of broad.
Yes.
Like, give me 5 questions to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll spit something out to you.
And it will help that I have already told it to be a venture capitalist in the agriculture space, so that it's already, once I tell it that, it's already starting to narrow down the data, right? It's already like, oh, okay, so I don't have to search the whole entire universe. I'm just looking through PitchBook, and I'm looking at agriculture trade magazines, and I'm looking at like newest technology in, pesticide use. So it's created a smaller data set already. And then I can say, what are 5 questions that I should ask? And it might tell me the 5 questions I should ask. And I'm going to be like, I don't really understand this one. Can you cite your source?
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be like, yeah, why don't you read this trade article about that? And it's a different approach than Google or any search engine that you use, because it's interactive in that way. You can follow up. It remembers what you're talking about. And frankly, the more conversational you are, weirdly, the better results you get.
Huh.
Google everything that it tells you, though, because it does make stuff up sometimes.
Yeah. So that sounds like, okay, I guess I never thought of it from that standpoint, is like really tell it the true perspective of where you're coming from.
Yes.
And give it sort of a personality a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So you talk about the data being maybe a kind of a barrier to this whole AI thing, because we still have to fact check things. I mean, it's still going to take a little bit of legwork and time to fact check these things. What other, when you're talking AI and technology, what other unique barriers do you think that there are out there that maybe people don't realize?
Well, I think there's the big barrier that I mentioned, which is that only a few players control the internet layer, right? If we think of large language models and generative AI as sort of the next version of the internet, it's much more privately held. And I think that's a real question for companies. I think there's a question about adoption, and there's a question about whether people are going to be lazy in terms of just firing people instead of reskilling and upskilling people to more creative roles within their organizations. I mean, they're sort of like, we're at a pretty wild inflection point. Like, I will tell you that as part of that Microsoft podcast, I interviewed this guy who's been working on AI for 40 years, right? He works at Microsoft now, and he's like, yeah, I got to look at GPT-4, and I was awestruck at what it can do. And I was like, but I actually don't want to hear that from you. You've been working on this for 40 years. Like, you're telling me that it's that real, and it really is. And so the question becomes, like, who's in charge of it? How do we know what it's doing? And then how do we use it in the best way possible without causing damage? Like, we have a huge opportunity to use foresight as we deploy this technology, and to think carefully and to ask really hard questions when companies come to you and they're like, I'm putting an AI on it. Now it's way fancier. And it's like, okay, well, what do you mean when you say that? Have you actually written those algorithms? But I will tell you, like, when I think about the ability to do materials discovery, when I think about the ability to say, tell me everything that you've ever known about battery chemistry, and then think about a better way to build a battery that can store gigawatts of solar energy so that we never have intermittency, so that we can do independent power generation in fields when we need to. Like, there's some really great potential.
Yeah.
I'm a nerd, so like I get excited about it, but it's not to say there aren't potential downsides too.
For sure. Well, I can tell you're very excited. I can tell you're obviously very knowledgeable about this stuff. And so that's kind of leads me to the next question for you personally. And I'm sure people can take something from this, but from you personally, when you get excited about certain things, but there are so many different facets to every little bit of technology. So what do you ask yourself? Like, how do you find what you think is a very interesting technology? Do you just like, is the world sort of your lifestyle, sort of your muse of like, oh, I really like that, but can that be done better? Like, is that sort of what you walk around on the everyday of, that's an interesting watch. The iWatch, blah, blah, blah. Or you see something else and you're like, well, that's interesting. I never thought about that. Can that be done better? Is that just sort of like a generic search that you do in your own head about what interests you and what to look into?
I think probably the investors in the room can relate to what I'm about to say, which is that the best part about being a journalist and then now an investor is that, like, I started college as a creative writing major. I loved writing, and I was like, oh, I want to do creative writing. And I did maybe 6 months of that program, and I was in these like fiction classes that were definitely not fiction, and like they were really just therapy, and everyone was crying, and I found that in those classes, I didn't think I had anything to say. I didn't have a lot to invent. And then I met this woman who was the editor-in-chief of our daily newspaper that we had at my school, University of Montana. And I don't think it was crystallized this way in our conversation, but in the course of talking to her, I realized, oh, there are infinity stories in the world. I never have to invent anything. I'm like an LLM, right? Like I just go and get all the information. It just comes to me by asking. And it's that way as an investor. It's that way as a journalist. Like the world just brings you stuff that you would never think of. And it's incredible. It's the absolute, these are the best jobs in the world because everybody is so freaking smart. The distributed smartness is so much more than I could ever even attempt myself.
Okay, so then what recently can you give an example of something that struck you like that? Like you weren't even maybe even looking for it and it just like hit you in the face of like, this is the coolest thing ever. I have to dig deep into this thing.
I mean, that happens like 10 times a day. Like just this week, I interviewed this trace genomics lady who's just like, yeah, people are brilliant, by the way. She's like, yeah, I just got super excited about unlocking the genome and how you could just, for years and years you couldn't. And then when I was at Stanford, like 10 years ago, all of a sudden you could just sort of like trace the genome. And then I thought, well, if we could apply that to soil, we could really, my dad was
you thought you were a nerd, huh?
Right. Like, that's what I'm saying. Everywhere you look, there's a nerd and they're brilliant. And that, I interviewed the founder of this company called Sway, who is she grew up in Monterey. She was like a surfer. She's obsessed with seaweed. I mean, she is obsessed. She gets so happy when she talks about seaweed, and she has figured out how to use seaweed, which is like endlessly regenerative, can be made into plastic replacements using the exact same process as plastic. And so she was like, yeah, we should there's some plastic we're not going to be able to get rid of. We just need it now. We rely on it. It's how you like keep protein powder dry in a package, or it's how you, distribute medicine in quantity. And so we should just do that with seaweed. And so she just went and invented it and did that. And I mean, it's just...
Yeah, that's the stuff that we all get grossed out by when it wraps around your leg and you think there's a sea monster that's going to actually pull you under.
Exactly. And she's like, we should go on a world tour of seaweed farms. And I'm like, all right.
Well, that's also an interesting thing to think about too, is we're all obviously pretty landlocked here. We have lake weeds, we don't have seaweed. But you have this unique perspective of being Midwest raised, but living out by the ocean in California, and things that, especially where you are very, very progressive on the tech side and entrepreneurship side. But when it comes to things that sort of hit you in the face and you're always open, like how is it different for us here as an investor versus maybe somebody out in Oakland, Monterey, or even let's say in Florida or on the East Coast? I mean, geographically, we have to think about things differently too, right?
I think so, but it's a superpower. I really feel like being away, there's no question that the energy in Silicon Valley is incredible, right? There are brilliant people and they are inventing things all of the time. And there is a lot of groupthink. And there is a lot of just absolutely unrealistic expectations about what people are going to do and adopt and know how to do. And so often I find myself applying the filter of half of my life, which is I really don't see everyone adopting this solution. I really don't see, one example, electric cars. I have been driving EVs now for 3 years. I can tell you as a car person, like it is an empirically better driving experience. They are so fast. Nothing ever breaks. They're silent. You are like a shark among minnows on the roads. And I had this argument with my dad who lives in Montana, and he was like, it's not going to take off in Montana because it is literally impossible to build charging stations across the state. And I was like, really? Are you telling me you can drive your truck all the way across Montana in one go and never stop for gas? If there are gas stations, there can be EV charging stations. However, this is why I'm not giving up on hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cars, because if you can stop and do something like getting gas, and it only takes as long as getting gas, that is more likely to be adopted when you're driving across Montana and you kind of can't risk that charging station not working. So it becomes this sort of everybody in the pool filter where you think some people here are going to do this, people here are going to do this. And also the benefit, I think, of investing here too is like, it's just not as expensive. I mean, the valuations out there, they're just stupid, and they're stupid all the time. And so the ability to be able to invest in a place where valuations are normal and reasonable is a huge win.
Yeah. So how do you feel the world of angel investing, specifically in technology? How do you feel like it's growing here in the Midwest? I mean, is it one of those things where, maybe outside investors are coming in and saying, like, for those reasons of like, oh, it's actually cheaper to do that here? Like, is the word out that the Midwest, specifically even maybe Minnesota, is actually a great place to do that?
I think the word is out within states is what I'm seeing. I worked with somebody at launch, actually, the fund I was with before I started my company, who just started Nebraska's first venture fund. I have had a lot of conversations with people in North Dakota, actually, because North Dakota has like the 16th largest sovereign wealth fund in the world and has dedicated a lot of that money to alternative assets and to venture, and is really trying to build a venture opportunity there. I am suspicious of, people on the coast who are saying, oh, I'm going to move to a state and try to start an investment community there. That even if I have now been in Oakland since 1999. If I tried to go to North Dakota, like I had a moment where I was like, maybe I should just move home and spin up a clean energy fund like overnight. I don't think that it would work. I do think that the value is in the communities who are already here, understanding the unique needs of the entrepreneurs who, maybe come here and go to the university, yes, but I don't think it's the kind of thing. There was a fund that tried to do this, Draper Fisher, DFJ, Draper Fisher Jurvetson started this Mercury fund where they tried to pop up managers in different parts of the country, and it just didn't. You have to understand the market that you're in, and so frankly, it's a win for the people in the states already who understand the opportunity, who want to stay, who want to build an economy that can sustain families in places that might be overlooked. Like it's a secret weapon.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. I'm sure that people have asked you many times, because you have a wealth of experience and you've been in this thing for a long time. You've seen different facets of it. You're not old. You're not old. You're experienced. You're seasoned. You're a salty vet. So I'm sure people have asked you, like, if you could take, it's like we've all been asked a similar question. If you take the knowledge that you have now and you could go back, 20, 30 years when maybe you started in the industry, what's something that you kind of wish you would have told your former self about the industry, whether it's good or bad, whether it's like, I don't ever want to do that again. I don't want to ever make that mistake again. Or I need to amplify this if I ever had to do it again.
I mean, I'm still mad about all the years I spent as a tech journalist where I wasn't allowed to buy Apple stock.
Ooh.
So that's one. Yeah. I would have been like, you know what? It turns out it's not a market moving amount. And if you went to your boss, they'd let you. That's very tactical, I know. No, I think that although journalism is a business, a lot of journalists don't understand business. And I did not for a long time. It took moving to the business desk at the New York Times and I had covered the tech industry from 1999 to 2013 by the time I left CNET and CBS Interactive. So I had gone from reviewing dial-up services to the iPhone and Facebook, and in 2009 putting out a video that was like, is Facebook evil? Is that what I'm starting to sense here? So just a phenomenal change that it took me until I got to the New York Times business test to put in a business context specifically. And it was at public radio that I started doing this deep dive into venture capital and frankly decided that the solutions to the climate crisis lie significantly in capitalism. And I wish that was an understanding, not just for having made smarter investments all along my career, but I think that is following the money is what journalists say they do. If I had actually done that my entire career, I think I would have been a lot smarter a lot sooner.
But a lot of people think that that's kind of a bad thing too, right? I mean, from a virtuous standpoint, like we don't want to. I think we feel sometimes that it's it's a mark against our personality and who we are if you admit to the fact that you are following the money, right? And I think that we maybe sometimes push back on that even personally of like, well, I'm not that shallow. I'm not going to do that. But you're saying in a business sense, you might want to look into it.
I'm saying at least understand the money.
Yeah.
Because it's a very powerful motivator no matter what people say. By the way, I want to identify a regional difference right now, which is that like the way I was raised, and here it's a little tacky to say that you're in it for the money, but man, when you're in Silicon Valley, it is not. It is not tacky at all. It is, it's all they ever talk about. But no, it's more understanding that motivation, understanding how it can distort things, understanding that Facebook wasn't evil until it figured out a business model that relied on like making you upset and staying there longer and fighting with somebody else. And so I think it's not that I would have taught myself to chase the money sooner. It's that I would have taught myself to understand how business works and how capitalism, although it has flaws, is also the greatest incentive system that humans have ever created. And understanding that is very powerful.
So since you brought that up, for those out there that maybe already have companies or you're looking to start a company, and let's just say that your dream scenario works out, your proof of concept works, you get investors, maybe locally, family and friends, and you're doing this thing. Since you brought up a big cultural difference, I think a lot of people here we don't talk about money. We keep a lot of private things private. And then where you're at in Silicon Valley for many years, that's very much out in the open. That is a huge difference in cultural, personalities. So how would you best suggest a company here in the Midwest, and let's say Minnesota, gets approached by a venture capitalist from Silicon Valley? Those two things just, there's got to be a language barrier that's there culturally. How do you best like meld those things to where it feels like, okay, I get it, it's money, we need the injection of capital, but god dang, I don't like them, I don't like their personality, but it seems like if that's who they all are, how do we sift through the douchebags from the people that are really like legit?
There are a lot of them. It's not all VCs, right? It's not, but here's what I will say. You can find good VCs that you want to work with. If you find one that you don't like, don't work with them. And I hope that you have the luxury to be in that position. One of the earliest sort of mentor moments I had with the GP at the fund where I'm now a venture partner was I went to him and I said, man, I just talked to this founder and I think they've got a tiger by the tail with this company. It's a great idea and we really need it. And I cannot stand him. He is a tool. And I think he might be such a tool that he's going to ruin the company.
Right.
But either way, I just don't like him and I'm not sure what to do. And Ramanan, in his enduring wisdom, was like, nope, keep walking. It's a 10-year relationship minimum with a VC. If I invest with a founder, we're having a starter marriage. And so if you don't like them and you have any inkling that you can get that money somewhere else, don't do it.
So that ick factor is real.
It's really real.
If your intuition saying like, this person's icky, I'm not going to jive, and it could be maybe it's you, could be, but either way, you got to think of it as a 10-year minimum relationship. That like I have to get along with this person, respect this person for this to work. If not, it's dead upon arrival.
Yes. Do I want to be on a board with this person, having board conversations with this person for a decade or more?
Yeah.
And if the answer is I would really rather not, I would highly encourage you to keep looking.
Yeah. I know that we have a little bit of time here, but I have to be the buzzkill here. I actually have to leave and go to my job at Twin Cities Live, which is actually just down the road. That's not going to take me very long, but I do have to prep for my show that we are live at 3:00. So I do think that we need to keep this conversation going a little bit. So I'm not going to leave her here, Molly here, just to die up here on the vine. So I want to ask you guys now, this is the audience participation part of it. When I walk off the stage, I'm gonna, just have the mic out, and if you guys have questions, and maybe we can have somebody. Oh, you got a mic right there. Raise your hand, and then we'll do a little Q&A with just Molly, and I'm gonna step aside and just say thank you guys so much This was really, really cool to be part of. Reed and your team, thank you. You guys were great. And it was great to meet
Ben,
you.
you're the best. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
What
you
a
guys.
treat.
So yes, if you'd like to get a question into the room, and one more time, a round of applause for Ben Lieber, please.
Hold on, we have to do an Ussie.
Yeah, let's do this. Everybody wave. Hi. Perfect. Thanks, guys.
So if you
Bye,
have any
Ben.
questions for Molly, we will help find you a mic. Reed has one, and I have one as well. So hands up.
This mic is now on. Okay, who wants to ask Molly a question? Don't be shy. Come on, people.
There we go.
All right, here we go.
Hi, Molly. We got it. Okay. Hi, Molly. I'm coming from North Dakota, and I'm very well aware of the Sovereign Fund. But a challenge that we have up in North Dakota, and it sounds like we have it down here in central Minnesota as well, is just entrepreneurs. There's money, there's some IP, but there's a shortage of entrepreneurs. Is there a solution that you see? Is there something missing in our ecosystem?
You know, it's funny, we were actually talking about this before I came. I said, well, GrooveCap must have a great relationship with the University of Minnesota, right? It must be like the Stanford to funding pipeline. And it sounds like yes, and also there could be more. And so I 100% believe that all the new entrepreneurs, like the most successful funding environments in the country are attached to universities in some way. And I think that that pipeline of talent that's coming here already to go to school, or that's coming from surrounding states to go to school, that can be cultivated in some way, that there can be partnerships with schools to really encourage those entrepreneurship programs, that you gotta grow them. Because it is, look, it's hard to get people to move to places, although I will say this region, big climate haven. So just start getting people here because the weather's gonna be better. It's true. Duluth is considered the #1 climate haven in
Squirrel.
America.
That wasn't a legitimate squirrel. You called it into existence, Molly. Look at that. The person that just
why is
shrieked
there a
from the
squirrel
audience, you're my new favorite person.
I-
Oh my gosh.
It's-
That's
poor
better than
baby.
the twins ballpark squirrel. I like that
Oh,
squirrel.
nubbin.
Poor thing.
All
I
right,
thought
who
that
brought
was
the
about
squirrel?
Duluth.
Who brought the squirrel inside? You guys, come on.
That poor thing.
Is he
He's
okay?
so confused.
All
Oh, he's coming back.
right, we got.
We'll figure it out. We'll have to
He's,
like
he's
politely-
going towards the natural plants.
He's so confused, that poor guy. Who
Poor
wants to
Dudley, he
pitch a
does,
sustainable
exactly.
squirrel habitat here
Sustainable
within?
squirrel habitat.
All right,
Oh,
Jack.
yeah.
Try to
I
get
don't
us
know
back
what-
on track here.
But I don't know what we're gonna do if we. Yeah, I'm like, if you have nuts and a box, we can.
We have a box. Our friend over here actually has a box. So if we get
Oh yeah, we
so
have
he
nuts
has a
and
box. So teamwork makes a dream. And then she has some baits, she has some nuts. Okay. So like
I
we will
can't-
work it out.
You guys, I can't believe Ben left me to trap a squirrel.
Yeah. He's like,
Hey.
welcome to climate.
That
Hey,
jerk.
Molly, did Ben bring the squirrel?
Is what? Sorry.
Did Ben bring the squirrel?
Apparently,
He
this
let
was
he
all
let
an
he
elaborate
let it out.
prank.
He let it out as he was leaving.
Yeah.
So
Now we know, Ben, prankster.
So
Please keep going.
my question. So obviously we're most of us here from Minnesota. We're angel investors, early stage. What do you like in Minnesota from an early stage climate tech standpoint?
I like ag. I really do. And I think we're starting to realize just the venture community took a while to get there, but I like precision agriculture. I like regenerative. I like things like I'm talking to a company actually that is connecting biomass There's this sort of waste to fuel pipeline kind of that you must be very familiar with. And all the companies that are trying to sort of connect biomass feedstock to those fuel providers, like those are just logistics companies without having to go really hard tech. And then, you know, I mean, like the fund where I'm a venture partner, Amasia, we're an investor in an aerial drone company. I know obviously North Dakota has a lot going on in that department. And I think drone delivery, some of those unexpected climate solutions are really important. But ag is a good one, I think, for angels in the sense that you understand the adoption cycles. And, you know, of course, it is hard for agriculture to make changes knowing that they've just got 1, maybe 2 shots a year to figure out if those changes worked. And where I think that angel capital can be really catalytic is in those companies that do have a research or an adoption, an open question, if you're willing to be more patient, right? If you're willing to understand that it could take 15 to 20 years for those companies to really mature, or even 12, even just outside the traditional venture window, but you can get that technology started, and it usually doesn't cost very much at the R&D stage, and they can be really powerful.
I got you. All right.
You got that one?
Yeah, I think we got time for one, maybe two more.
More.
Hey, Molly. I'm a
Hi.
big fan of yours. I've been a fan of yours for years. So a question I had had it written down for this moment. As someone who has observed and reported on numerous startup successes and failures, now including your venture career, what are the common traits you've seen over the course of that period in the most successful founders?
I'll repeat it in case you didn't hear it, and also to stall. The successful traits of the most successful founders. I mean, there are sort of easy answers, like they work really hard and they're really organized. I would say the most successful founders are the ones that you least want to talk to at a party, because they are so obsessive about what they're doing. They're so phenomenally focused that you're glad they're doing what you're doing, and you have to go to the bathroom now because you have now talked about it for 45 minutes or an hour. Like I really fundamentally relentless focus. And you can tell the founders who are kind of like tourist founders, like I'm going to do a crypto startup or an AI startup because everybody's doing it now, or I'm going to get into clean tech because there's a bunch of IRA money. You can tell the ones who don't really care, and you can spot them quickly. And a lot of times maybe they're fractional CEOs, or, they're just like, I wanted to be a CEO. The more annoying they are about the thing they love, the more likely they are to succeed at that thing.
One more. Anybody else?
Oh, there's one near the back, right?
Yep.
I see a hand.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Speaking of regenerative agriculture, I know that it sounds like that's sort of your area of interest. I know that Microsoft also is working on a few different kind of areas. I think they've got like a Farm Beats agriculture research group. From my experience, so I'm actually kind of in this space as well, and I really enjoy it. Something I've noticed over the course of a few years is that there's sort of two different SKUs. We kind of see a lot more technology-related innovations. You mentioned precision agriculture, so either sensors on the ground or drones, aerial or hyperspectral imagery. But there's also a lot of stuff happening on like the chemical engineering front, specifically, genomics and trying to get crops to be more resistant to droughts. In your sort of experience, like, where do you see this industry sort of going? More towards the technology side, or more towards some of these more chemical innovations? Or do you think it's going to be a mix of both? Kind of curious about your thoughts there.
Yeah, I am always for a mix of both, because some things are going to work for, some farmers are going to be willing to adopt more technology solutions. Others are going to have more kind of chemical and biochemistry needs, especially as we start to see. What I think is exciting about this field in particular is that I originally got interested in climate. Like I said, I was like, it's a tech and business story, but I also got the series that I launched at Microsoft at Marketplace was called How We Survive, because I was like, well, I keep hearing people say that we're all going to die. So like, who's working on that? And I originally came to this as an interest in adaptation and resilience. More, you will hear this more often now, of course, referred to as resilience. But I think that the food system innovations and the chemistry innovations and the planting innovations are fundamentally about resilience. They're about, and look, I mean, this opens up a really interesting national security conversation. Like, this is the reason that you see the DoD include climate change as a major risk factor, because national food security is a national security issue. And it becomes a resilience question. When the weather gets less predictable, you need to understand what it's going to do, and you need to be able to predict what's going to, and this is where I think AI has a role to play. You need to be able to predict future outcomes that are not based solely on past data. And that's where things start to get really interesting. So I think every solution is applicable, but I also think this cannot be an overlooked sector, whether it's food systems, waste to value. I just interviewed a company called Natural Fiber Welding that makes natural materials like alternatives to leather and alternative textiles. They do all the Allbirds shoes, and there's like a Stella McCartney line, and they're doing it all with natural materials that just recycle back to what they originally were.
Well, Molly, as we begin to close the conversation, we just want to make sure, was there anything that we missed throughout this conversation that you would like to leave our audience with before we close?
Oh my gosh, we covered so much ground and we even had a critter. Like, this is the best day ever. I will only say kudos to you for being angels. You are catalytic capital. Like, you have the opportunity to take risks that institutional investors don't, and to convince us of something that we might not have already tried. So I'm just a huge fan of this class of investor, and I love what you're doing. And I'm happy to be here.
Round of applause for Molly Wood, everybody.